Right now, something is unfolding in the Americas that could reshape energy prices, migration flows, and even the rules of international power for years. If you only read the headline, U.S. strikes Venezuela, it sounds like a single dramatic moment. But the real story is bigger, messier, and far more dangerous than one night of explosions. Because once a superpower says it has removed another country's leader, the next question is never just what happened. The real question is what happens next, and who pays the price. On January 3, 2026, major outlets reported that the United States carried out large-scale strikes inside Venezuela and that President Nicolas Maduro was captured and removed from power. President Donald Trump described the operation as successful and said the United States would temporarily run Venezuela and take control of its oil sector, while Maduro would be taken to the U.S. to face prosecution. At the same time, reports from inside Venezuela spoke of confusion, power disruptions, and no clear proof that the U.S. had full control. That gap between political statements and reality is where long crises usually begin. Venezuela rejected the operation and called it criminal aggression. Regional leaders reacted strongly. Brazil's president warned that the action crossed an unacceptable line and raised serious concerns about sovereignty and precedent. Precedent matters because countries watch what the world allows, then decide what they might attempt next. To understand why this moment happened, three long-building pressures must be connected: legitimacy, security, and oil. Venezuela has lived through years of political controversy and international disputes over leadership. U.S. officials have repeatedly accused members of Venezuela's leadership of links to organized crime and drug trafficking, and legal cases against Maduro have existed for years. When a country is framed as a security threat instead of a diplomatic partner, the language of negotiation shifts toward force. Oil is the third pressure. Venezuela holds some of the largest oil reserves in the world, yet years of sanctions, mismanagement, and infrastructure damage have weakened production. Whoever controls stability controls oil infrastructure, and oil creates leverage on the global stage. By late 2025, pressure increased. New U.S. sanctions targeted Venezuelan oil exports, companies, and tankers. These were not symbolic actions. Oil revenue funds salaries, security forces, food imports, and public services. When that flow is restricted, the state itself begins to weaken. At the same time, Venezuela faced regional tensions, including its dispute with Guyana and increasing international legal scrutiny. All of this created a situation where escalation became more likely, even if the outcome was uncertain. When the strikes happened and the capture claim was announced, the crisis shifted from pressure to direct intervention. This is where many people misunderstand the danger. Even if a military operation succeeds quickly, the political and humanitarian consequences can last for years. Removing a leader does not remove power. It fragments it. Military units may divide, institutions compete, and criminal groups expand into the vacuum. In societies already under economic stress, sudden shocks often lead to violence, shortages, and instability. The legitimacy issue also reverses. While the U.S. may describe the operation as security enforcement, many countries see it as regime change by force. Even governments critical of Maduro hesitate to support a method that suggests powerful states can remove weaker ones when convenient. Without regional cooperation, long-term stabilization becomes extremely difficult. There is also the legal question. Under international law, the use of force against a sovereign state is highly restricted. Without clear authorization or proof of imminent threat, critics argue the action undermines global norms. When those norms weaken, other states feel encouraged to take bigger risks, and bigger risks often lead to larger conflicts. The idea of temporarily running a country sounds simple, but governance is not a press conference. It involves electricity, hospitals, food supply, policing, and public trust. Venezuela already struggles with infrastructure and services. If the system collapses further, civilians suffer first. Even people who welcome change can turn against it when daily life becomes harder. When public anger grows, legitimacy collapses again. This instability creates migration pressure. Venezuela has already seen millions leave in recent years. Another shock could accelerate migration, forcing neighboring countries to tighten borders and increasing political tension across the region. Migration does not remain a local issue. It becomes global influencing elections, budgets, and public opinion far beyond Latin America. Oil remains the biggest variable. Restarting production is not easy. It requires investment, expertise, security, and time. If production rises under new authority, questions over contracts, revenue control, and foreign influence can spark new conflict. Oil can fund recovery, but it can also fuel corruption and resentment if people believe resources are being taken without consent. At the same time, the information battlefield is already active. Events like this attract misinformation at massive scale. Fake videos, edited audio, and false narratives spread quickly, especially in the first days of a crisis. Speed becomes the enemy of truth. That is why verification matters more than emotion. Looking ahead, 3 broad outcomes are possible. One is a coordinated political transition with unified security forces, international support, and a clear path toward elections. This is the best-case scenario, but it requires discipline and legitimacy. The second is prolonged instability, where factions compete, services fail, and criminal networks grow stronger. This is the most common outcome after interventions. The third is regional escalation, where diplomatic retaliation, sanctions, or proxy actions spread the crisis beyond Venezuela. What happens next depends on signals people often ignore. Watch whether Venezuela's military speaks with one voice or many. Watch ports, refineries, and power grids. Watch migration routes and humanitarian access. And watch Washington itself, because internal political pressure can reshape foreign policy quickly. Even if leadership changes, Venezuela's deeper problems remain. Recovery takes years, not weeks. If the world treats this as a headline instead of a long process, the human cost will rise quietly after attention fades. Removing a leader is fast. Stabilizing a nation is the hard part, and the consequences of this moment will be felt far beyond Venezuela.